A pleasure to me all at last, and here we are once again with films I should have talked about years ago. And being that this is our third installment in the season so far, what we're gonna do here is, well, perhaps something a bit more on the recent side of things. And so we'll just go on ahead and take a bit of a look at A Man Called Otto. Yeah, this is actually a piece that I feel like could have been talked about a while ago, considering the fact this was 2022. The same year that I did my second season of films I should have talked about years ago. And you might also remember the location, right? It was basically the basement / party room of a certain shop set that we had some lease work on. But ever since it expired and the building itself was bought out by a different realtor, we had to relocate. And so, while I can't quite make content there anymore, regardless of what the circumstances are, it doesn't matter all that much. Because this whole house just has a lot for me to work with, whether it be for content or otherwise. So in this case, A Man Called Otto is actually loosely based on a novel by Friedrich Bachmann known as A Man Called Of. Yeah, so I don't quite know exactly what to expect about it, but as the novel itself describes it, it's about a grumpy old man who develops an unexpected friendship with next-door neighbors whom come in across the street. But here's the thing though, in the movie, we pretty much know what to expect because first off, Tom Hanks is the big man himself, Otto Anderson. He's an old man, well into his 60s, and trying to make do with life as it turns out. A lot of things have changed around him. A lot of US cars are starting becoming more international, with companies like Toyota, Mazda, and the whatnot coming in. The railroads are all a bit different. His life has changed in a lot of different ways. And one of his best friends has unfortunately gotten a certain condition, and his wife is barely able to do anything about it. So, what does that mean for Otto? Well, it turns out he's at a hardware store as part of the opening scene takes place, where he's trying to get a hold of some rope. He has a bit of difficulty putting it all together when the cashier brings up the price tag, saying that it's measured by the foot. And apparently, he's only looking for a 5-foot section of rope, but they try to put it in as like a 6-foot measurement of rope. But even when the manager comes out, Otto just gets pretty frustrated with the whole thing. Because let's face it, this really is a unique explanation of how generation after generation after generation, times truly have changed. Being that Otto, according to the plot, is 67 years old in 2022, the present day, so to speak, this would mean that he was pretty much dead center in the baby boomer era. And as most people would probably realize, lots of people were born during that time. Between 1945 and 1964, that was probably millions of people born in the United States. And there's a good amount of names that I could mention other than the likes of Tom Hanks or Otto Anderson, basically, whichever way you put it. There are a good amount of other people I could talk about just as well, but we don't want to get too distracted here. What exactly was the purpose of the rope? Well, the thing is, Otto was planning to take it home with him and create some sort of scene in his living room. Yeah. Essentially, he was planning on creating a noose for himself. Now, we don't know exactly why he's doing this, hanging himself in his own home and calling the people to let him know about the phone bill and the electricity, that they can shut it off because he doesn't intend to pay the rest of the bills for any of that stuff. You could say he really went above and beyond to ensure that it was going to be a confirmed suicide for him. However, it becomes very quickly interrupted when he realizes that some people across the street are having trouble navigating on the roads, trying to parallel park with a trailer behind. He goes out outside to show them how it's truly done, even taking over their car to park it himself when they can't do it on their own. As it turns out, these people of his are actually new neighbors that have moved in from across the street, and their car and trailer, unfortunately, were a bit of a challenge to wrangle up. But Kind of crazy that Otto, despite being a man who's known a lot about the olden traditions and customs, apparently has some experience with the likes of this newer technology, automatic shifting cars and whatnot. It's just crazy how he can parallel park in it like nobody else could. But one thing that really does send him in quite the spiral in his life is that these new neighbors happen to be Mexican. Yeah, so anybody out there who was above the age of 70, completely patriotic, living in the United States, and happens to have neighbors that are just moving in of Mexican or Spanish origin, I really want to know what your experience is with that. Did you have to intervene in anything like in this movie? Comment down below if you have. In any case, though, Otto does try to go back inside, and he also tries to get things straightened out. There, of course, are other characters that we do get to encounter along the way as well, but the thing is that all these different people that we come to know about, from Jimmy, Marisol, to the family themselves that happen to be across the street now, to, of course, his best friend, known as Ruben, as well as his wife, Anita. The thing is, he's got himself a pretty decent neighborhood, which has changed continuously over the years. But even worse is the fact that one minor thing that people keep doing to him is calling him Otto instead of Otto. Yeah, that's the thing about it. It's Otto, O-T-T-O, not Auto, A-U-T-O. Like anybody would immediately know about that. It kind of reminds me of a similar thing I ended up doing. I know a person with the last name Yanni, but everybody keeps thinking I'm saying it like Yanni. Like, seriously? How can I help it? Everybody has a different set of voice samplings. Everybody's got a different tone. Everybody's got different octaves, which I cannot believe somebody mentioned that word to me. It's just something that's been drilled into my skull. What are they talking about? Oh, man. It's like you can never get any more crazy. Oh, either way you look at it, this is Otto Anderson, of course. Like I said, he's more about the olden technology as we get from a series of flashbacks where he and Ruben are looking over at cars. And there's also a point where he's dealing with his hardware problem. And there's a similar thing that happens to when the news plan failed. He tried to go for the shotgun approach one day. Until the neighbors knock on his door. Oh my gosh. That actually is a little bit funny though, in all honesty. But in all seriousness though, we do eventually get to see why Otto is the way he is. Because he himself once had a girlfriend. And believe it or not, we actually get to see his relative Truman Hanks. Yeah, think about it. This is Truman Hanks, the son of Tom Hanks, and this is probably one of the first films I ever seen him in. And believe it or not, he also plays the character Otto Anderson, the younger version at least. The flashback supposedly takes place at some point in the 70s, perhaps, where he's at a train station waiting for a passenger liner. And there's a girl that he manages to find just as well. A bit of conversation between the two, not just at the station, but on board the train itself, does eventually lead up to a nice little relationship that even lasts into the bus ride that goes through after the train stops, but it gets pretty catastrophic rather quickly. The bus ends up in a major accident when a certain restroom break happens. It turns out Otto, even though he managed to live it out, his girl did not. And it was barely, by any means, sustainable for him. But the real big problem that we come to know about is just the fact that this girlfriend of his, who would later turn out to be his wife, and later through marriage and eventual death, the thing is, even though the bus wreck was something pretty horrible that happened, death by natural causes long before Otto himself. It's easy to see why he was basically willing to commit suicide to reunite with his lost wife, who has been gone for a while now. But on top of the problems that he's had to deal with his neighbors, there's also this person named Malcolm. And apparently Malcolm was looking to get a car. Yeah. But at the same time, there was also another person who needs some driving lessons. And that's eventually what happens. Otto and Marisol do eventually take to the streets with a manual transmission Chevrolet in tow. Because again, Otto is not exactly willing to upgrade to an automatic. I don't know why. And of course we know that the problem stemmed out mostly because of the fact that, well, he and Ruben were going from old classic cars, muscle cars, 80s cars, 90s cars to basically J cars. And Otto was not very happy about the idea. But even though we know that J cars can do so much better than US cars any day, week, month, year, or decade of all of our times, this is still a man who is more than willing to just conform to his old customs and traditions. He does not really want to change. Now, I know a few people that aren't exactly willing to upgrade to more simpler times. Just get along with everybody else. Make your life simpler. But no, live more complex lives and outdated old technology. But above all that, though, Otto is still not exactly willing to give up on this little life that he's got now. Not just with neighbors or another person by the name of Malcolm, but other people as well. Because what eventually does happen is that he goes over to a train station and holy crap, a guy almost gets himself killed. But Otto was quick to jump in and pull him off the tracks right before the train shows up. And everybody started recording him all of a sudden. Like, it's not as if Otto has not had enough to deal with here. But the way we would see it is that eventually what happens is that we're given the news about supposed realtors hoping to buy out the property that Otto lives in and everybody else in it as well. Ruben, these new neighbors, and all that stuff. So basically this whole section of land that this neighborhood resides in would become property to someone else. What we eventually get, though, is a little committee in favor of Otto Anderson, the man whom saved a person's life and happened to be a resident in this neighborhood as well. He was taught about so-called social media, and it's not exactly something he's real interested in, but seeing the good that it brought in a lot of people and inspiration in others, even that so-called would-be victim of a train wreck, Otto was more than willing to support this whole movement. This whole movement to shut down the campaign, to have the neighborhood shut down, and basically bought out. So in the end, despite this crooked investor, he would ultimately lose. And while he did retreat, it unfortunately wouldn't last long for the victors. Because even though Otto, along with this set of neighbors, would all get along quite well, and he was even willing to give Malcolm his car. So that's a lot of wins when you think about it. The neighborhood wins over some investor wanting to buy out the place. And Ruben, of course, smiles for the first time in a while in spite of his condition, pretty much. But on top of all that, we get a little get together. But unfortunately, Marisol's children, they try to enter Otto's place, and they find him dead. Dead pretty much of natural causes. So, much like his former girlfriend, wife, lover, etc., Otto Anderson has now basically passed on. The old age of 67, which I will say is a good mark to leave off with. Now, while this kind of story ends, it's quite possible that it only just begins. for the families, friends, and whatnot that he's come to know about over the years. Or even in that small amount of time that has passed since he was willing to put a noose on himself. But I will say that this was actually a pretty good movie from 2022. It's got the more realistic sense that it doesn't exactly try to push things with effects or whatnot. But it does really bring us a good story. An old man who was more about the old days, the times that he grew up with and the times that he's known most, rather than simply conforming to today's society, where he could have a smartphone, he could have a lot of things that many people do, but chooses not to for the most part. Either way you look at it though, it's a movie that I feel like is more than worth a watch. To see a grumpy old man getting a bit of fits and all that is already pretty funny, like Angry Grandpa 2.0, but with Tom Hanks as the lead. I almost wonder if he could play the role of Angry Grandpa in a film like that. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what fate decides, but for my scoring of this, we'll go ahead and give it a good 8.9 out of 10.1. While not exactly masterpiece material, this was more than worth it for even one occasion. And I'm sure in due time I might see it again, and I might have even more worth talking about. So, with that in mind, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.